one after the other.
Are you reading it?
Yeah.
So I expect, I expected that most of the meat, like in the Bob Woodward books, you don't really have to buy those books because most of the meat turns up in the Washington Post. Not so in the Jake Tapper stuff, because there's meat on every single page. And
I feel compelled to write something about this. And I feel compelled to take a swipe at Jill Biden, because
she's Lady Macbeth.
She's Lady Macbeth. That's exactly right. That's a great way to put it. She knew from the first time he ran, or not the first time he ran, but from his first term, from the campaign before his first term, that he was demented.
Mm-hmm.
And she led him around, let him on stage, let him off stage, covered for him. I mean, this is like Edith Wilson and Woodrow Wilson all over again.
Right. However, it's worse because Woodrow Wilson came into the White House in 1913 sharp. He didn't leave that way, but Ronald Reagan,
massive stroke.
Came in sharp.
Ronald Reagan,
sharp guy, smarter than I gave him credit for at the time, as it turns out. When you read his letters, you're like, oh, actually, he was a very thoughtful guy. But and it's not right to leave a sitting president in office for a year or two when his mind is mush. It's not right. But this is a whole different level.
This was a cover-up. Yeah.
They elected a guy that they knew was already senile. He was already suffering from dementia. From day one of the campaign. I mean, according to the Tapper book, his mind blew up when Bo died, 2015.
Right.
And they ran him 5 years later. So he wasn't better by then, right? Aging doesn't work.
No.
I mean, of course, obviously, it's not like always a straight line, but it's just, but there was a general downward trajectory. I mean, some of these stories are absolutely stunning.
He talks about, for example, 1 week into his presidency, Biden goes to Capitol Hill at the invitation of Nancy Pelosi to talk about the Democratic agenda, and just could not vocalize why he was there. Looking around, smiling at people, and she took over to say, "Well, here's the Biden agenda. This is what we're going to do." He was worthless, useless. The 1 week into his presidency. So we need to blame Joe Biden. We need to blame Nancy Pelosi. We need to blame Kamala Harris. We need to blame whoever it was that happened to be head of the DNC. They all were part of this conspiracy to cover up for him. And then he had the unmitigated gall to run for re-election.
It's unbelievable, right? And behind the scenes, right? Everybody knew better. So there's this group of 5, cronies whom are described as the Politburo by Jake Tapper in the book, who are basically these insiders that you've never heard of, who are basically campaign advisors and staff. And they basically they've been running the country now. I assumed it was like, I really thought it was Tony Blinken was running the country.
Yeah.
Turns out he really wasn't. It turns out, Lloyd Austin, there's a reason why Lloyd Austin thought he could go AWOL, because nobody needed him.
Who's he going to tell?
It's a no-show job, like in The Sopranos. It's right. None of them were talking to the president, and nobody needed to talk to the president because the president really wasn't the president. He was only around from like 10 to 4 by all accounts. If something had happened, that famous ad, there's a phone in the White House. There's a crisis at 3:00 in the morning. Who's going to pick up that phone? Not Joe Biden.
Do we wait for the president?
If it was after 5 p.m., he wasn't picking up that phone. Couldn't pick up that phone. It'd be scary if he picked up that phone. And all these like things that we thought were just gaffes, like, we'll go to war over Taiwan. No, it turns out he was.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what?
Bonkers. He literally didn't know the policy. He's literally addled. I mean, I guess it's in some ways, it's the ultimate. The wisdom of the founding fathers is exhibited by the fact that we just the country didn't burn to the ground over the last 4 years, and here we are still talking. So I guess it's a great system. It's president proof. I kind of said that about Trump's first term too. But like now, this is unparalleled in terms of political scandals. Not only I'm going to say, I don't think there's ever been anything close in the last 250 years. I don't know that any other, you can look at many other countries that have had something like this. I think you have to go to like ancient Rome with the emperor who turned his horse into a god. You have to find that level of corruption and insanity. I don't think, there were thoughts that, Brezhnev wasn't really all that great by the late 70s. It wasn't like this. I mean,
no way. And besides, they had a Politburo that they admitted to,
Right.
Okay. Yeah. The general secretary's addled. That's okay, because we have these 12 guys around him that are going to run the country. We don't have it here. In this book, also in this book are admissions that, the cabinet members would go a year without ever seeing the president. No meetings, no nothing. He just wouldn't see his cabinet members. He probably wouldn't have even known many of his cabinet members.
Yeah, apparently that's a recurring theme in the book, right? Where he meets people whom he's known for years. And I don't think he has that disease where you don't recognize faces. He's just was suffering from dementia. You and I were talking. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You and I were talking a couple of days ago about the George Clooney op-ed in the New York Times, and I remember when we were still on Sputnik saying, why would George Clooney, of all people, write an op-ed for the New York Times now on this issue? Well, now we have an answer, because Biden flew out to California for this major fundraiser, like the biggest fundraiser in the history of the Democratic Party. And he didn't have the foggiest idea who George Clooney was. And he's known Clooney for years. And Clooney was one of his primary fundraisers. No idea who he was. And finally, one of the aides said, "Oh, Mr. President, you remember George." And Biden says, "Thanks for your support, George." Like, no, he doesn't have any freaking idea who this guy is. That's just raised $10 million for him in one night.
And no idea. And who is George Clooney, by the way?
And who is George Clooney? Like, everybody in the world knows who George Clooney is. And then Clooney talked to, who was it? Was it Katzenberg? It was somebody big.
Yeah.
And said, I'm gonna write this op-ed. And he's like, "Oh, please don't do it. Please, please." No, I gotta write this op-ed. And he went and did it. And then just today, I read about the whole Taylor Swift thing, where they sent what's her name? Pretty Woman.
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. They sent Julia Roberts to convince Taylor Swift to make an endorsement, because she had heard from her Hollywood friends that the president is, just an empty mannequin. And Julia Roberts apparently talked her into it. This is a bad look from absolutely every angle for the Democratic Party. This is just terrible. They tried to pull one over the eyes of the American people. And why would any voter trust you now when you tried to do something like this?
And so what's interesting to me too is, in reading the book, Tapper, he repeatedly keeps coming back to the polls that show that the public just wasn't on board. None of this worked, right? That's why Biden lost, or why he would have lost, and how Harris lost. It's fascinating to me that even though they propagandized, they had control, so much control of so much influence, nevertheless, the American people sat in their living rooms in, wherever, and they looked at the TV and they're like, "I'm not buying what you're selling. That guy is too old, and he's out of it, and he can't do it, and I'm not going to vote for him." And just the answer is no. and the arrogance of the powers that be inside the Democratic Party to think, no, we'll convince them. I mean, there's that. I mean, I'm sure you've gotten to this point. It comes up pretty early on, where at one point, one of Biden's veteran pollsters calls in and says, "Oh, well, I'd like to run some polling numbers, some internal polls on the age issue." "Oh no, we don't need to. We don't need any polling." The Politburo tells him. "What do you mean you don't need any polling? You always need polling. It's a presidential campaign." Now the decision's been made. And remember, we always kept hearing this. Biden beat Trump. He's the only person who's ever beaten Trump, which is a stupid.
Not true.
It's stupid logic. I mean, Bernie Sanders probably would have beaten Trump by more.
Sure.
And it's like any number of other candidates might have beaten Trump. And, it's just sort of like, it's like, and so what? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you could go back to the last time we had a situation like this, which were, these Grover Cleveland, the Grover Cleveland's in, Grover Cleveland's out, Grover Cleveland comes back. And, there's these rematches with Benjamin Harrison. One time it goes Benjamin Harrison's way, but the next time it doesn't go Benjamin Harrison's way, right? So it's like, it's like big deal. I mean, that's like, you would think that like in this day of big data, right? Most money in political campaigns gets spent on data, not on ads. And so in this age, you would just think that like, okay, we need numbers, we need facts, we need to respond to facts. These guys around Biden and the Democratic Party, it was like a religion. It was like a religious cult. It was blind faith. It was not real. They just, they were out to lunch. How could we, and now we're, it's hilarious. They spent the last 4 years talking about Trump and how bad Trump was while Biden was president. And I would say, but Trump's not the president. Let's talk about Biden. Well, now it's like that this has happened. They're saying, well, Biden's not the president. Let's talk about Trump.
Yeah.
They just want to talk. It's maddening because they're still insulting the intelligence of the American people.
They are. And they might be more convincing if Biden had ever stood for something. Like for example, Biden was always one of these middle of the road guys. He may early on have been kind of racist. He was against integration through busing. He was the primary author of the terrible criminal justice bill of the 1990s. If he was, a Democratic version of Ronald Reagan, or if he was a John Kennedy figure who actually stood for something,
right,
and people could rally around him and he inspired passion, all right, then maybe I could see, for old time's sake, we're going to cover up for Joe.
Yeah.
But he was none of those things. None of them.
That's
really I remember.
Well they covered up for FDR too, right? They covered up for FDR.
Sure. Yes. Exactly.
FDR was a god. People had his portrait up in their homes. They thought that
my grandparents did.
I used to see them in garage sales when I was a kid. People thought that he had saved them from dying of starvation. He created the New Deal, the social safety net as we know it. And so, like, if he's getting a little long of the tooth and he's going to violate, like, the gentleman's agreement that we only serve 2 terms, well, there is Hitler and Tojo to consider, right?
That's right.
I get that.
Let the man finish the job.
Yeah, let him finish the job. And then in 1944, okay, he kicked months later, right? So they should not have. But still, and the war was pretty much won by that point. But, they didn't know what they were going to do. What we're going to let Henry Wallace be president? So
right, exactly.
So,
one of my heroes.
I love him. I get that, though. I get it. Look, that's the other thing, right? The Joe Biden as national grandpa, he was always an asshole.
Always. From when he was young.
Yes.
From when he was a young man, he was an asshole.
Day one. And like the sympathy for him, it's like, okay, well, he's had tragedies in his life. No question. If you live long enough, a friend of mine said everybody has tragedies in their life. And
that's right.
And it's like, I don't make light of what's happened to him, but that doesn't get him off the hook for any of this. You know, and I don't understand the sympathy for him. You know, I don't understand the cover up for him. I don't understand the idea that only he could save us from Donald Trump. There was, you know, in 2020, there was an incredibly impressive lineup of Democrats up on that debate stage when Joe Biden was coming in fourth in primaries, right? I mean, if we really look at this, right? I mean, Pete Buttigieg was very impressive, even though he was wet behind the ears, and you know, but he was an impressive guy. Amy Klobuchar, totally respectable, better than Joe Biden.
The governor of Washington State, Cory Booker too. Yeah, there were lots. In fact, remember Bernie, there were so many Democrats running for president. They had to separate them into two nights. Yep, Elizabeth Warren.
Right. Yeah, there were like 18 of them. And you know, and Elizabeth Warren. I mean, who on earth could look at Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and say, "Yeah, I'm going to take him"? Like, what on earth are you thinking? She was as fast asleep. She was smarter than he was wide awake. You know, I mean, it's completely, it's inconceivable. I mean, it must be maddening for people like her.
Oh my God, Ted!
Keep their counsel. They all have to shut up. It's a mafia.
Yeah, they do. It is. It's a mafia. The fix was in from the beginning. During the 2020 campaign, when Brian Becker and I still had our show, I know I've said this before, but it's even more appropriate now. There were 3 incidents that so bothered me that we spent, you know, a quarter of the show talking about it. Once, Biden was giving a speech, and his eyeball started bleeding, right? And the whole white of his eye became red. He had some kind of like surge in his blood pressure. It's an old man thing. This happens when you're an old man. Your eyeball just spontaneously starts bleeding.
Lovely.
Number 1. Oh, just awesome. Number 2, he's giving a speech, and he's, you know, he's talking and giving a speech, and his teeth fall out, and he catches them. He catches them and he puts them back in his mouth. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know he wore dentures. And like a decrepit old man, his fucking teeth fall out of his mouth. Number 2. Number 3, it was just a week or 2 before the Iowa caucuses, and he goes out on stage in Iowa to give a speech, but there are really bright lights. The media are all there, bright lights. He gets confused because he can't see beyond the lights, and he gives the entire speech with his back to the audience. It's like, seriously, this is who you guys want as president. There's nobody else in the Democratic Party that's better than this. This is what you want. Yeah, that's just great.
Yeah, no, you know, thank you for reminding me of the teeth thing. I'd forgotten that. I mean, there's so
it's on YouTube.
There are so many outrageous incidents, right? I mean, you know, I always like the one where he's calling out for the dead lady whose funeral he had attended. She was
killed in the car accident. He went to the funeral and he's like, is she here? Where is she? Stand up for everybody. Round of applause. It's like, she's dead. You went to her funeral a week ago.
By the way, you know who I'm believing right now? I'm believing Tara Reid. I was never 100% sure, but now I do. I'm 100% sure. I believe her. I do.
Oh my God.
Just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to revisit that, you know.
We actually have to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we can get her on the show. We can talk to her.
She texts me every once in a while.
Yeah.
Tara Reid, for those of you who don't remember, Tara Reid was an intern in Joe Biden's Senate office, and she said that he got handsy with her one day.
In the stairwell.
Yeah, in the stairwell. Nobody believed her. She ended up, her word, not my word, she ended up defecting to Russia.
Yeah.
And
although you can't really defect to Russia anymore, but okay.
No. And then like 4 months after she defected to Russia, she went back to Oregon to go to her daughter's wedding, and then went back to Russia again.
She was defecting to the Pacific Northwest then. She was undefecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a good question. We have a question from Road Beef. When I was with the agency, did I ever write or see a cable about another world leader in a similar, let's say, condition as Biden finds himself? No, never. That's a great question. There was a situation immediately after the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait where the Emir of Kuwait had a nervous breakdown. But that wasn't dementia. His country, he'd been overthrown, his country was invaded, and he just cracked. So, other than that,
Robert Mugabe was super old.
He was like
right?
90-something years old. Yeah.
Yeah. He was quirky, right?
Yes.
By the end,
yeah.
super quirky.
Yeah, he was.
Like, but he was kind of Biden-y a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Muammar Gaddafi, the last few years, maybe he had a lot of pressure.
How about like Suharto? He became quite murderous toward the end.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
That's a great question. Not in my experience.
Duterte's a lunatic.
Duterte is a lunatic. And I'm very glad that he's in the dock at The Hague right now, where he belongs.
That is where he belongs. 100%. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking, I mean, I can't stop reading this book. It's just,
it's a page turner.
It is a page turner. And if you've been following this thing, I mean, it's like sort of like every time I pick it up, I'm like, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I mean, I always had a pretty good sense, but it's like, there's so much. And it's like, oh, okay. So we're not all insane. So I get it now. You guys were gaslighting us. And this is, by the way, what gaslighting is. Gaslighting has come to mean, just lying. Like, my girlfriend gaslit me and she said she was going to the store, but she was going on a date with another guy. That's not gaslighting. That's just lying. Gaslighting is where you are trying to pretend, gaslighting is where you try to make someone insane and question their own sanity. Where it's like you break into their house, you move all their lamps to the other side of the room, and you make it look like no one was ever broke in. That's gaslighting. Right. It's kind of stupid, actually. Right. I'm not sure it ever works. But I heard that back in the Cold War, the KGB, did you ever hear stuff about this? Like the KGB used to do stuff like that. Like they would break into like an American journalist's, I heard
the Israelis, the Israelis do it now to American diplomats.
What do they do?
Rearrange the furniture, take shits in all your toilets. They do.
It's so incredible.
They're real assholes.
Like, how weak would your sanity have to be in order to start questioning? Like, I'm pretty sure that's not my shit. You would know someone's been in there.
Yeah, but that's what they want. They want you to freak out. Yeah.
Wow. Well, someone's saying, by the way, that she didn't use the word defect. The media did.
Okay. So, okay.
We'll see. All right. So there's a lot here. There's more. There's also the big beautiful bill, which is. Did you know it's actually called legally?
I did not know that. I did not know that until yesterday.
The big beautiful
bill act.
Yeah, the big bill.
What a stupid name.
I mean, okay, so Donald Trump never ceases to surprise, but I mean, it's like, the country feels. I mean, it's not just him. It just feels like we're becoming so infantilized, and I do feel like it's both parties who are doing it to us, and the media is going along with it, and it's like it's every detail. It's sort of like how on every station they all copy the Fox News, gerund approach, like bearing down on the East Coast, a storm, with winds sweeping the city. Like
Superstorm Sandy. This is a beef I have. Superstorm is not a meteorological term. It was Hurricane Sandy. Period. Right. It was a hurricane. Yes, it was damaging. Lots of hurricanes are damaging. But what makes it a superstorm? What is the measure? I hate that.
Storm of.
But it's the same idea.
Superstorm. Like it's like a blaxploitation film.
Somebody mentions Forsen Sebastian. Thomas Massey is the only Republican with a spine. Amen to that. I've mentioned a couple times. He's a friend of a friend, and we've gone to a half a dozen ball games together. He is a delightful guy to go to a ball game with. Delightful. And he always brings like junior aides with him who can't afford to go to a ball game and sit in a decent seat. Cool. He's a really good guy. And he's the only one who's a real, he's a true believer. Like, he believes that he has thought through these issues and that his position is right, and that you've got to be consistent. You can't just go with the political winds one way or the other. And if this is what he believes, then that's what it's going to be. And I have deep respect for that. Deep respect.
Yeah, no,
and to tell you the truth,
don't fault that.
I cannot think of many Democrats that I could say that about. I would say that about Jim McGovern from Massachusetts, because by God, he's been pro Snowden and pro Assange from the very beginning. But he's pretty much the only Democrat I would say that about. Massey and McGovern, the two of them.